to another episode of Rugby with Pads. Today, we're going to be taking a quick look at some rules to live by for in-season. So we've done a lot of draft prep and fancy 101 of just learning things in general for beginners and intermediates among you, but we haven't really talked about how to work your team in season. Now, you've probably gone through your drafts already. You've probably done all that kind of stuff. That's really exciting, but that is only part of winning it, and it's probably the part we front load so much on, but it's probably the least important part of managing a fantasy team. So what I want to do is going from the bare minimum, making a legal lineup, to really being competitive and giving you top 10 tips that I've learned along the way to really to see you through. And we'll start off with point number one. Don't burn your waiver wire priority unless you really need to. Now, waiver wire priority is an interesting concept, because what happens is whenever you pick up a player, you go to the back of the queue. So if you're at the front of the queue, you have priority. So let's say, for instance, Bijan Robinson is on the waiver wire. No one's picked him up, or someone's dropped him out of a fit of rage or something like that. If you are at the front of the queue, you have priority. So you could pick him up before anyone else can. Waivers are run typically once a week, normally on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and you will have priority to do that. Now, you want to keep that waiver priority as much as you can, because ultimately, when those big players do come up, or there is a breakout or an injury, you want to be able to react the quickest. When you spend that waiver priority, when you actually make a waiver pick, you end up going to the back of the queue. Now, I am really bad at this because I make lots of waiver transactions, and probably too many. And some of those transactions I could probably make in free agency. Now, free agency is when you can pick up players willy-nilly and just make a change to your lineup. That's normally done between Thursday and Sunday before the games start. And the example I'm thinking of here is, how much is that kicker that you're picking up and burning your waiver wire priority really going to, give you over, say, blocking an opponent, getting a running back they desperately need because of injury? You could look to free agency for those kickers, really, because they're going to be plenty, because no one's really going after, no one really needs Riley Patterson. I'm choosing that example because I know Dan, who's been on the show recently, has burnt his priority over Riley Patterson recently, but it is what it is. You could instead retain that priority for the next week, get something in free agency that might not be quite as good as you wanted, but you make sure you know how it works, and make sure you understand how your league works, because sometimes they reset every week, sometimes they're rolling for the rest of time. So if they're reset every week, sometimes if you're at the bottom of the pile anyway, you're going to get given waiver priority anyway already, because you're doing the worst, and that's how it's normally calculated at the start. But my advice is, don't burn it unless you need to. So make waiver picks that are going to benefit your team, and make sure you understand the consequences of doing so. It's a weird one, but what I would say is, if you've got any questions around that, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram. More than happy to give you situational examples as well. Number two is, don't just go by the projected numbers in the app. They're rubbish. Case in point, I have a week one game against Alex, who I had a week one game against her last year as well, and I was narrowly predicted to lose last year. I won handily. This year, I am looking to lose by 10, 15 points, according to the computer, but the projections are awful. This is a league where I was predicted to go 0-14, but still have an 11% chance of winning the title. Go figure. There's 10 people in the league, so I've got a better than average chance to win the title. Oh, that's weird. Anyway, I have Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is rated lower on this app than Tyler Higbee. Okay. Bijan Robinson is rated lower than Mixon and Chubb, and they get those guys. But he's even rated lower than Cam Akers and Connor. Jahmyr Gibbs has been given 4.2 points. This is a half PPR. He's going to be scoring 10 plus. They're not expecting him to do anything. They're seeing him as a number 3. They're predicting David Montgomery to score 3 times as many points. It's weird. DeAndre Hopkins isn't being seen as a number 1 target. Devontae Adams, when was the last time he just scored 12 in an opener? This is weird. Bijan will have the volume to put him over. Jameer Gibbs is the number one. D Hops is the number one, and Burks might even be out for this game. Adams is a benefit, from the huge vacated targets from Waller, and rookies lean on the tight end. So Schultz should have a monster game as well. You can't just take the points as they're given, because most of the time they're wrong. And fun enough, I did some exploring here. Last year on the NFL Fantasy app, predictions were wrong, as in the lineup predictions were wrong 55% of the time. So it's worse than a coin flip. Know your set players, know your situation, and set your lineups accordingly. And don't just think that I've got a lower predicted, I'm going to lose. I'll have to, I'm going to replace this guy for this guy just to boost my score. It doesn't matter. Projections are projections. What happens is actually what happened. What matters is what happened on the field and what actually gives you points. Number 3 is, if you're going to do any research at all, make sure you just know your players. Yeah, and the guys throwing to them as well. So make sure you know your players and the QBs. That's as much of it as really. You don't have to do a huge amount of research. If you're interested in picking a player, do a little bit of research on them. But you'll get guided by me if you listen to this as well. But know who your players are, so you know who to play week in, week out, and know their situations, know their tendencies, know their quarterbacks. That's really interesting. What that means is, let's say you've got, in a normal league, you've got 2 running backs, 2 or 3 wide receivers, a flex, and a tight end. So that's 7, 8 players, let's say. Let's say they're all on different teams. Plus your QB, you need to know another 8, 9 players. You only really need to know between 15 and 20, 25 players about what's happening with them. I think that's pretty easy to do. And if anyone playing football, as in soccer, for any of you Americans listening as well, you know more players than that, even if you don't follow football. So you will get to learn way more than those players. And what I would recommend is also follow them on Instagram, do things like that. It's quite interesting, and you buy into them more as well. But I would say as a minimum, just understand those guys. And in the same breath, you kind of play your own game. It's an individual game, this really. There are opportunities, obviously, to get into your opponent's head, and that's a really interesting part of the game, doing the mind games thing. But there are opportunities to do that, and like playing the star receiver for their star QB, or playing a defense that you think your QB is going to throw receptions or get sacked by. But just play to get as many points as you can, because you might find opportunities crop up to get in your head, and that's really fun. But sometimes they don't really kind of like jump out at you, and you just need to do what you got to do, really. Point number 5 is, don't drop your players without a plan. Now, I'm going to pick on someone who hopefully is listening to this. Mike in our League of Collusionary Gentlemen drafted Alvin Kamara. Fine, yeah, that's good. He then went and picked up Donovan Peoples-Jones. He then dropped Donovan Peoples-Jones for Trey Palmer. Now, he tried to get back Alvin Kamara after realising the mistake he'd made, and he couldn't put him on IR because he's a suspended player, and this league didn't have that. But he just thought, I can't play in week 1. I'm just going to have to find someone else. In the end, I ended up picking Alvin Kamara up because I didn't burn my waiver priority by picking up people left, right, and centre, and that goes back to that point 1. And I was able to pick up Kamara, and I am currently trying to shape him into a mega trade involving Kelsey. We'll see in the next episode if I manage to do that as well. And in the same mindset as well, waivers are really important to keep an eye on them, but don't let them ruin your team. I mean, for example, if week 5 is going to suck for a team, but you're trading away 2 wide receivers for 1 week, dropping them because of a bye week, for example, you're going to have to just suck it up for a week. I think you are going to, maybe this message should be, don't let waivers and setting the lineup perfectly ruin your team. So my team, this is an interesting team. This is my Zombie League team, and I know it's going to suffer in week 5. That's why I've used this week 5 examples. I've got Mahomes. He's got right. The lineup is Mahomes, Sanders, Herbert. Don't like Sanders and Herbert, but Metcalf, Allen, Godwin, Andrews, Laporta, Deontay Johnson, Jahan Dotson, K. Dotton. 4 of those players, so my 3 starting wide receivers and K. Dotton, are going to have a bad time. Now, in this league, it is going to matter if I have to go there. I'm going to probably slowly waiver away or try and trade some of those players over the next couple of weeks if they do well and stuff like that, to make sure I'm in a better position for week 5. But what I'm not going to do is just rage drop them and pick up some bum just for a seat. I would rather keep them and risk the chance of becoming a zombie, than losing a very high draft capital assets. And I think the thing to bear in mind is if your team is struggling, in all redraft, it's probably easier to take this piece of advice as well. If your team is struggling, let it struggle, because there will be others in a worse state than you further down the line. If you're struggling in a bye week, bye Mageddon, etc., then don't worry too much. But you know what? A lot of these I feel like contradictory statements, but I'm also going to say number 7, don't let draft capital force you to playing someone. Just because you pick someone up in the second round doesn't mean you have to do it. Let's say you drafted Bijan Robinson in the first, but the hype doesn't fly, and his replacement, Tyler Algier, is available on waivers for basically free. Maybe he's getting twice as many touches, but you're calling your number 1 pick a failure. Don't worry about it. Reload. Someone might want to trade you pennies for him, but you don't. You might have to just retool to win. The draft is not where you'll win your league. It gives you an opportunity to put yourself in a position to win your league, but the long season play is where you're going to do it. And I have drafted away, sold away keepers in leagues. I've sold away third, fourth, first round picks in leagues as well, just to give myself a chance to retool, because what you don't want to do is cling on to that Bijan Robinson type player. It's probably not going to be Bijan Robinson. I really hope it's not, just for the sake of saying, well, I drafted him in my first round, and you've played him every week out of loyalty or honor or something like that. It's not honor, it's numbers game at the end of the day. Number 8, same thing, kind of, or an extension of that. Don't be afraid to retool and use your league mates to do so. We draft before the season starts. You'll find out in the coming weeks we know nothing. Next week, my theme for my theme players on Thursday is going to be we know nothing, or what do we know now. Trading with multiple partners, as much as you might be suffering, they will be too. So there is opportunity. Always keep that league dialogue open. If your commissioner hasn't already set it up, a WhatsApp group, Discord. If the app itself doesn't have a really good a talking channel, that's what you can take advantage of, and just open up the lines of dialogue to your peers. It's really good, and also it gives you a bit more insight into the discourse. You naturally pick more stuff up from people, what people's tendencies are, and what they'd be willing to give you up if you want to win a trade. I never see winning a trade. I'm a bit more calmer than that, a bit more fairly balanced. Anyway, remember your goal is number 9. The hardest thing to do in fantasy football is actually making the playoffs. Once you've done that, it's a different game entirely, but we'll get to that later on in the season. Your job after drafting it in this part of the season for the next 14 plus weeks is getting to the playoffs. So I always keep a bit of a tally. I kind of work out, right, how many games do I need to win to get into the playoffs? Once I'm in the playoffs, I can relax, because then I can start retooling my players and work out who I need for week 15, and we'll do that when it comes to about week 12, because that might be where you're starting thinking about that. But that's a really, really, really key point. Just know what you need to do to get into the playoffs, because that is the hardest part of this game. And finally, point number 10 is move your Thursday players and your Friday ones, if you've got one of those weird weekends, out of your flex spot. I don't know how many times I've got to explain this. I explained it in Fantasy 101, 102. I think I said at the start of this session as well. But your Thursday players are not going to give you any flexibility. They are stuck. And if you, let's say, have an injury and you need to pivot, and you've got someone stuck in your flex spot, and you can't pivot away to a running back, and you've got to pick a wide receiver, and you can't fit, and then you end up having an illegal lineup. That's not really good. It's not much of an admin job. Put them in your normal spot. So if you've got a tight end, put them in a tight end spot on Thursday. If you've got a wide receiver, put them in a wide receiver spot, because you would get more flexibility out of your flex spots. Flex spots don't score more or less. You don't get multipliers from them. So what's the point in not giving yourself flexibility for the weekend and making sure that you have those in your arsenal? So there you go, 10 points. Let's run through them again quickly. Don't burn your waiver wire unless you need to, as in like use it for an important player. Don't just go by the numbers on the app. The computer does not know more than you. You know your team. If you're going to do any research at all, know your players and know who are throwing to those players. Play your own game. That's all I say. Don't try and play mind games unless you think you're really going to have an effect on someone. Don't drop players without a plan, because someone will have a plan for them. Waivers are important, but don't let them ruin your team, especially when bye weeks happen as well. And don't let draft capital force you to play someone. Number 8, don't be afraid to retool and use other people in your league. So, open those lines of communication. Maybe that's real thing here. And remember, your goal is just to get to the playoffs and finally, cannot pull this home far enough. Take your Thursday players of your flex spot. You will get a notification every week from me to do so. So just make sure you do it. Right. That's it for now. I've recorded quite a lot of content today, so probably going to take a rest, and you'll be taken up to Thursday, hopefully. If you've liked this, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, all of the socials at Rugby with Pads. It's on YouTube, it's on all of your Spotify, etc. Like, follow, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. You can support the pod, rugbywithpads.com, or you can go straight to our store.rugbywithpads.com. That takes you to our Etsy if you'd like to support and buy some merch. With that said, you'll hear from me maybe over the weekend. I might release another pod over the weekend. We'll have to see how that goes. But if not, I will see you on Monday for, hopefully, what is for you a Victory Monday, unless you're playing against me. Alex, I'm talking to you there. And Dan. I'm in a lot of leagues. Yeah, Alex and Dan, who I hope listen to the pod, talking to you guys. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. If you got this far, really appreciate it. You're going to be doing some more of this type of shorter form content for you guys to absorb over the next coming weeks. So less essays and deep dives. But thank you again, as always, and I will see you all on the virtual gridiron.